Welcome to the Business of Learning, the Learning Leaders podcast from Training Industry, where we speak with industry experts and thought leaders on all things learning and development.
Hi, and welcome back to the Business of Learning. I'm Michelle Eggleston-Short, Editor-in-Chief here at Training Industry.
And I'm Sarah Gallo, a Senior Editor. Today, we're joined by Jess Ekstrom, bestselling author and founder of Mic Drop Workshop and Headbands of Hope, to discuss the psychology of motivation and really what it means for L&D leaders. So, Jess, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. And I'd love to just get started in how to define motivation, kind of in the context of the workplace.
I would say, I think the first thing that I would think about in motivation is what your first thought is when your alarm goes off. When your alarm goes off in the morning, is it this dreaded, oh my gosh, I can't believe, like Groundhog Day? Or is it, oh, I'm really excited. I know what I'm doing. I'm contributing. And so I think motivation starts like when our alarm goes off and how we talk to ourselves. There was this really interesting study in the Harvard Business Review about willpower. And for a while, we thought willpower was like, gas in the tank. Like, this is how much willpower you have in a day. And each time you do something, it gets less and less. And the study showed that willpower isn't as much of a resource that gets depleted over time. It's more of an emotion that we feel. It's an emotion that is triggered by something. And so we've all experienced a time where we had motivation in times that maybe we typically don't. Like, I'm going to get up early on a Sunday before my kids wake up to work on this idea, or I'm going to stay late and train this person, even though it's outside of my role. That wasn't willpower. It was this emotion that we felt. And so that's the kind of motivation that I'm interested in, is one that is connected to an intrinsic feeling. And that starts when our alarm goes off.
Yeah. And when we think about workplace learning, why would it be important for L&D leaders to kind of pay attention to that psychology behind motivation?
I remember when I first created my training, Mic Drop Workshop, where we train women to become speakers. I was wondering why it wasn't landing. I'm like, but I'm giving them all the information. They have all the data. They have all the downloadable checklists and everything. Why am I not seeing women turn it into something big? And that's when I realized I was giving them information without mental context of what was possible for them. So for example, today, at TICE, I talked about the difference between being, spotlight speaker and a lighthouse speaker, where spotlights make it about them, lighthouses make it about guidance. And so once I started the training with, instead of the three, things in your keynote, but instead getting into the mindset of what a confident speaker is, which they come from service instead of selling, then that's when the information became more digestible. So I don't think that we can really absorb information unless we understand the psychology of how people like to be taught. And it's I say, it's like when you are saying something really good, but you have bad signal on the phone. It's well, then no one's hearing it. And so if you can't get to how people like to be, how people like to learn, how people like to work together, how people like to absorb information, what's stopping someone from believing they can do this, then the rest of the things can begin. Yeah. And a lot of times, people tell me after Mic Drop, that mental stuff was the thing that they needed more than any of the checklists and contracts and things that we help with. It was I just needed to know that I could.
Yeah, it's that mental shift.
And it's really about helping learners kind of realize the why. So helping them realize not just what the content is you're trying to teach them, but why it matters, and kind of helping them have that light bulb moment and making those connections.
And we're all human and we're all individual, and we all have different places and different stories that we are learning from, but we also are all human. And I get so interested in the psychology of how we learn. And so I think sometimes when we can see everyone as different, but then also we're just like inherently the same. We all want to belong. We all want to feel valued. We all want to feel this. And so sometimes
Yeah.
if we can understand like what are the fundamental needs of humans, then we can get to like everything else in a more of an individual way.
Yeah. That desire to learn is really universal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, to
And
live
betterment.
and
Yeah.
perform and do a good job. People want to go home at the end of the day and feel like they did a good job at work. So that's huge.
But I think what's interesting about what you all do is I think it's vulnerable for adults to say, I don't know. And it's tough for people who are supposed to feel like experts to say there's a skill that I need to learn, or I don't know what this tech is. I don't know what AI is, or I don't know how to, this team is disengaged and I'm not sure. There's so much pressure to know everything.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a huge part of L&D is just helping people realize that the ability to recognize where you need help or recognize like I have room to grow here is actually such an asset and such a strength. There was a study at MIT about imposter syndrome and how like we see imposter syndrome as this terrible thing, but it really actually showed that people who experience feelings of imposter syndrome actually perform better at work. They're more
Wow.
community focused. They're more we than I. They ask better questions. They're more curious, as opposed to someone who's like, I got it. Don't worry. I have all the answers. And so I like to say, well, the goal isn't to get rid of imposter syndrome. It's to manage it. It's to almost leverage it. And as long as it's not in the driver's seat, it can be in the car with you.
love that. Yeah. Really that vulnerability, like teaching that in the workplace, especially the higher up you go, career-wise and becoming a leader, like you had mentioned, it can be difficult to say, I don't have all the answers, but kind of recognizing the humanity and that is your employees want to hear that. They want to connect with you on a human level. And the fact that
Yes.
you don't know is actually really powerful.
Yeah. And I think not enough people realize like the power of like, let's figure it out together. I'm not sure. Let's do it together, including
Yeah.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love if we could dig into the two different types of motivation. So intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And what do those kind of look like? How do those differences show up?
Yeah. So I like to think of extrinsic as I must do and intrinsic is I want to do. So like mustivation and wantivation. Mustivation, like extrinsically comes from like something or someone outside of yourself. So I must do this training because my manager is requiring it. I must like do my taxes.
You know what I mean?
Versus intrinsic motivation comes from a want. Like I want to learn how to speak. I want to learn what it's like to excel in this job. And I like to think of extrinsic motivation as checking boxes and intrinsic motivation is connecting the dots. Like you can say, or you can see like, if I do this, this matters over here. Whereas extrinsic is like, I got the job, I got the promotion, I got the role, and now it's this. And all of it is this like never ending cycle, this leaky bucket that has you keep pouring water into and you don't realize it's coming out and you're like, I'm putting so much into this. Why is it not working? But I think where I don't want to lose people is that extrinsic motivation is bad. It's not. I think that there's like healthy competition and wanting to win and wanting a trophy can be great. But it's about the ratio that you give it. Like how much of your motivation comes from extrinsic? How much of your motivation comes from intrinsic? I know this is hard questions to really quantify, but if you say like, well, everything I do is based off of extrinsic factors, then it gets tough. And the irony, I think, in all of this is people who are intrinsically motivated, who love the process, who love like the practice lights off shooting basketball hoops when it's supposed to be closed. Those are the people that get the greatest extrinsic rewards because they just the willpower is connected to emotion. It's something that they deeply love. And so I like to say, well, it's like a lot of times all the extrinsic things that we're looking for, the fame, the recognition, the money, the status, happen more effectively, more efficiently on the other side of intrinsic, like when it's not.
As a learning leader, your organization looks to you to close skills gaps, meet compliance standards, prepare your business for the future, and more, which is a lot of responsibilities, especially for a team of one. That's why we created TIA, your AI-powered training industry assistant. TIA is upskilled on training industry's vast library of resources, including research, job aids, course content, and more. Use TIA as your guide for tackling any L&D task. By becoming a training industry member, you'll gain access to TIA in addition to becoming a part of the membership community, where you can connect with like-minded L&D practitioners and experts. Driving the business of learning can be challenging, but remember, you don't have to go it alone. Try TIA today for just $30 per month. Sign up at trainingindustry.com/membership.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we're looking at intrinsic motivation, what are some maybe common training methods that maybe undermine intrinsic motivation and we may not realize? Like, how can we best leverage it?
I think that making sure to take snapshots of moments when you can connect your work to an impact. A lot of times when we're doing something at scale, the like individual person that we just helped, get better leadership or get better speaking is just like 1 in a million. And so if we can zero in on some of like just those snapshots as a team, I talked about this today at TICE, where we call it a smile file. And anytime we get any kind of reminder or evidence that what we do works, we put it in our shared drive. It's a smile file. And then at the beginning of our all hands each quarter, we start with a smile file, because we're going to get into all the nitty gritty, where we made money, where we lost money, profit margins, things that need to be improved. And it can just be, again, the never ending cycle of like, nothing's ever enough. And so if we can start with, actually, like, you're in accounting, you don't ever talk to anyone, but you're a part of an organization that produced this outcome, like this person who was able to give a TED talk or who was able to, lead a meeting at work. You're a part of that, no matter like what your role is. It's all part of the same mission. So I think an intrinsic technique could be a smile file and like figuring out like, what are those stories and the moments that we can remind people, what I do matters. In the long run.
Like that seems really powerful, especially maybe when morale is down or there's like a big change or shift going on, just reminding people like, look at this impact that we've already had, and see where we can grow.
I think that's why people get nervous too with like mergers, acquisitions, or changes in leadership, because it's like, is what they want still what I'm working towards? And so I think that Headbands Vote, my first company, got acquired. And I feel like that was not a regret I have, but like something I wish I would have done differently is like ensure the team that was still there and ensure the buyer, or make it had the same North Star as I did. And now I see it from like how they felt. My importance was like, they all have jobs, like it's great, and not am I still working towards the same thing that I signed up for? Like I didn't answer that question for them, and now I realize how important that is.
Yeah. Identifying like the values.
Yeah, like we're still working on this, and if that's changing, great, but tell me, because I need to decide if that still works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. From a psychological standpoint, could you dig into some of the key drivers of intrinsic motivation that L&D leaders should really be keeping in mind when designing programs?
So I think that the self-determination theory that I talked about today, and again, I was laughing because when I was on stage, usually when I get into self-determination theory, I can see like eyes glaze over, faces go like, okay, time to get on my phone. She's talking about theory. Everyone in the room at TICE was like, I'm all in. Tell me, period. And
Love a
so,
theory.
self-determination theory is, by Desi and Ryan in the 80s, and they looked at like what self-motivates people. Well, how can people be intrinsically motivated? There were 3 psychological needs that they discovered. So autonomy, feeling like they're in control, connectedness, feeling like they're connected to people, and competence, feeling like they're good at it. Now, of course, this is like not a just checklist that you can go off of, but it is a direction that you can head. And so I also give 3 questions of like, who can I help? What can I control? How can I do it best? That help answer those, check those 3 boxes. And so they said if these 3 psychological needs can be met, feeling like we're in control, feeling like we're connected, feeling like we're good at it, then that influences our ability to be intrinsically motivated and be self-determined. So I don't think anything is cut and dry or black and white, but I at least love to know the science and the direction of like, where does my head need to be in order to be intrinsically motivated? And self-determination theory is it.
Yeah. Love that. Love to hear, like, how can learning professionals kind of channel that into their training programs and then create these learning experience that really get to the heart of that motivation?
Yeah. And, I think that it was so interesting hearing Ken, talk before me today about like in person and virtual and what's like trending in learning development. And I think that people need to be able to see people. I think that virtual definitely has its place still. But I think the connectedness part of self-determination theory is really hard to do, sometimes over Zoom or like remote environments. So, and I'm speaking from someone who I have a remote team and I've run a remote business. We did all of our trainings and all of our events virtually since 2018. And we just this year had our first ever in-person event where I was like, oh, this is why people do this. I was seeing the price tag of like a venue, a this, a that, food and beverage and lodging, and not seeing like the actual like ROI of connectedness. And so I think there's so many things, but that's just one thing I'm seeing, in the age of AI. How can you bring people together?
Yeah. Jess, I feel like one common challenge we hear from our listeners is that learners will go through a training and then it's lost after the fact. There's not really that behavior change a week later or a month later back on the job. So I'd love if you could share kind of what role managers play in reinforcing or hindering motivation after training is delivered.
I think about this a lot as a leader myself, of how I let what I learned trickle down, maybe not by like framework, structure, 360s, whatever, but by example. And I know this probably sounds really cheesy, but I think that we have to emulate what we want our people to do. And I found myself like sometimes in Zoom meetings, like with my team, like trying to do something else, like while being with them. And I saw other people doing that. I was like, oh, that's so annoying. Like that just, we're on this meeting. And then I realized, oh, I'm also doing that. And so they feel like it's okay because of course they're watching me do it. And so I think the manager's role or supervisor or anything is just to lead by example, and which can sometimes be a gut check. And I know it was for me when I was like, oh, I'm not giving them my full attention. So I need to look at myself before I tell them to do something.
Yeah. It's great advice. Definitely. Lead by example.
Yeah, I know. And I'm just like, it's so overdone, but I feel like it really is.
One of those things that's easier said than done. It takes that self-awareness and,
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jess, it was great talking to you today. How can our listeners get in touch with you if they like to reach out?
Yes. JessEkstrom.com is great. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you're interested in any of our like speaking trainings, you can go to micdropworkshop.com and we would love to hear from you.
For more resources on this topic, check out the episode description or visit the show notes on our website at trainingindustry.com/podcast. And don't forget to rate and review us wherever you tune in to the business of learning. Until next time.